it gets quoted quite a bit. Srila Prabhupada quoted it, otherwise also it gets quoted quite a bit. And Sukadev Goswami speaks it um, in a way to distinguish between the materialist and aspiring spiritualists. Dehapatyagalatradveshatmashenasya sattvasvapi tesham pramato nidanam pashyannapi na pashyati. Person devoid of Atma Tattva do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers like the body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see the inevitable destruction. This is the second time that Sukadev Goswami is talking about people who do not have an interest in spiritual advancement. So in the second verse of this chapter, 212, he had characterized such people as apashyatam atmatattvam. So meaning they do not inquire into the real nature of the self. So Pashyan is for kind of, it refers to both. Pashyan means to see, Pashyan means to inquire. So we'll see their Pashyan was to inquire, and here Pashyati is to see. And in a way we can say why they're similar, because through inquiry one is able to see. One is able to see the truth. So there he had criticized apashyatam atma tattvam, people who don't inquire about the real nature of the self, and he called them grahamedis, and said they're worthy of criticism because they do not inquire. Now, in contrast to this, if you see the very first words that are spoken by Sukadeva Goswami in the Bhagavatam is Varyan Eshate Prashnaha. That he says, O king, your question is glorious because it was based on Atma Tattva. So Varyan means Atma Tattva, Prashna means Prashansa, that is worthy of being praised. So we see the contrast that Sukadeva Goswami is driving in over here. That people who do inquire about the nature of the self, just by the process of inquiring, they become glorious. Now, even the Grahamedis inquire. In fact, Sukadeva Goswami says that they are saharsana, that they have thousands of questions. But the questions that they have are not on Atma Tattva. The questions that they have are basically on mundane topics. So if any of you, and I'm sure you all have had the opportunity to have conversations with people outside the spiritual environment, then you can see the conversation can involve so many kinds of questions. That, have you seen the sports team recently? How are they doing? Have you seen this political event? How's that going? Have you seen this stock market? How's that going? So almost unlimited questions, but they're all useless because of the fact that they are apashyatam atma tattvam, that they lack the inquiry into what is into the real nature of the self. So this verse answers the question, why do they not inquire? So Sukadeva Goswami has described the symptoms. Now he is describing the cause. The reason that they don't inquire is Dehapatya Kalatra Desh Atmasenasya Satswati. Because they are too attached to the self and the family. And because of this, they do not see the inevitable destruction. So, and sometimes, not always, things are given in the order of importance. Most important first, then. So Sukadeva Goswami says, Deha Patya Kalatra Desh. So Deha is the body. And that is something that somebody is most attached to. That body is self-preservation, taking care of the body, health-wise. Then the second is apatya. Apatya is what is produced from the body. And this is, of course, the children. And the verse is, of course, spoken from the context of men. So they are very much attached to the children. And Kalatra. Kalatra is wife. They're attached to wife. They're more attached to the child because the child is produced from one's own body. And the wife, because she helps in that, then they're attached to the wife. And Adishra is others in that kind. So others basically mean family members or friends or other relationships that they form. And the mistake that they make is that asatya sanish asatya sanishu, that they consider this fallible. So asat means something that is not true, something that is not permanent, something that is not infallible, which means asat is fallible. Asat is infallible. Sat is fallible. So they take shelter of these fallible soldiers. So why are they fallible? They're fallible because they themselves are in a precarious situation. Prabhupada would often use that example. How can one drowning person help another drowning person? How can one afflicted person cure another afflicted person? So, because they themselves are fallible, they cannot be they can give you the illusion of protection, but not real protection. So what is, taking this analogy one step forward, the purpose of the soldiers is to defend against enemies and to drive them away. So what is the biggest enemy of an embodied soul? The biggest enemy of an embodied soul is death. And later on in the Bhagavatam, not sure if it's the first six canto, I think it's in the first six cantos, where the analogy of Maharaj Puranjan will be given, that how Maharaj Puranjan, he had a kingdom that was protected by soldiers, and he lived there with the queen. So it is, everything is basically a metaphor. But the fact is that when we get this body, then there are also so many enemies that are trying to invade. And there they say that there are two mice, one white and one black in color, that is eating away at the rope that is holding the body. And then they say that the white mice is the day, and the black mice is the night, which indicates a travel of time. That just because of the influence of time, the body is being eroded. Srila Prabhupada would humorously comment on it. Once he was in the temple, and there was ecstatic kirtan going on, and he saw his disciples, and they were all jumping up, Hari Bol, and jumping up and down. And then Prabhupada looked at it, and he said, once I used to have a dancing body, now it's gone. And another time he was giving a lecture, and he said that when I was young, then people would like to come to me because I was good looking. And so by young means he was saying when he was a child, people would come to me and then he would say, what a good looking child, what a beautiful baby. Now I'm old, I'm ugly. Nobody wants to come to me. And everybody was laughing. So that's the nature. That's the nature of the body. That with the influence of time, it is constantly being defeated, and that's what Sukadev Goswami is surprised about. He says that people they he says Pashan, that they see this Nidhanam. So Nidhanam means death. So one way of understanding is people see this death all around them. People see this, the soldiers being defeated over and over again. And then he says, Apina Pashyati. But they do not see. So we say they see, but they do not see. That's what Sukadeva expresses amazement upon. But he also gives the reason. He says Pramata. So Pramata means because they're mad or they're bewildered. Or Pramata also means because they're too attached. So he said because of this reason, all reasons, the combination of the reasons. They're mad and they're attached. They're attached because they're mad, or they're bewildered because of uh, they're mad. So he said, Pramata, Pashyati apina Pashyati. Because of this madness, they are seeing, but they are not seeing. So it's kind of interesting. So it's a little bit tangential, but um, there's actually a research that was done by um, a team of scientists from Israel who are also very surprised about this from a scientific basis. That why do people, uh, why are people not afraid of their own mortality? Because they put this premise that humans are probably the only species that is aware of their own mortality. That from a very young age, from the time that the child is aware, the child becomes also aware of their own death. But nothing changes, and they continue life, same Pashanapina Pashyati, same principle. So what they did in this research was that they mapped the brain waves, and they isolated a particular brain wave that uh, is linked with the emotion of surprise. So they took those, I think they're called EEGs, and they showed things to the subjects that evoke the element of surprise, and they were able to isolate that brainwave, the brainwave pattern. Then what they did was, to these subjects, they showed them pictures of various people who were their friends and family next to things that indicated death. Like they showed a picture of a friend next to a graveyard, or they showed a picture of the friend next to a stretcher with white cloth on it. But they did not notice any surprise, because they accepted the fact that yes, all these people, it's natural. Somebody born will die. So they accepted the fact that there is death that is linked to these people. They then showed them the picture of themselves next to something that symbolizes death. And they noticed there was extreme surprise in their brain. So the conclusion they came is, while people recognize death in others, they are not able to recognize death in themselves. The brain is not wired to recognize it. And of course, their scientific explanation is more from a perspective of evolutionary self-preservation. So they say that when the human species evolved and it reached a point where it became conscious of itself, of its future, then the brain rewired itself. Because factually speaking, what they posited was that if the brain accepted the inevitability of its own death, then the person would not function anymore. They would basically become, and they use words which are very similar to the words that we have. They would become detached, they would become renounced, they would not be actively participating in activities, they would not procreate. So, since the species preserve themselves, so in order to protect against that, the brain rewired itself to create this intrinsic barrier of not being able to recognize one's own death. So it's an interesting, it's there on the internet. If you Google, the title of the study is Prediction-Based Neural Mechanism for Shielding the Self from Existential Threat. If you Google it, there's a paper. I just read the synopsis, but there's a lot of more scientific fact that I could not understand. But it's interesting. So of course, when we look at it from a spiritual perspective, then we know that this pramata is this thing comes from pramata, and the madness comes from material illusion. The madness comes from material illusion that uh, uh, others may die, but I am eternal. So Sukadeva Goswami, as a liberated soul, he expresses surprise at it. Srila Prabhupada writes a purport, interesting, that he says that the material advancement of human civilization is like the decoration of a dead body. Everyone is a dead body, flapping only for a few days. And yet all the energy of human life is being wasted in the decoration of this dead body. Sukadeva Goswami is pointing out the duty of the human being after showing the actual position of bewildered human activities. Persons who are devoid of the knowledge of Atma Tattva are misguided. But those who are devotees of the Lord and have perfect realization of transcendental knowledge are not bewildered. And like I said, this is a verse that Prabhupada spoke about in a few times. He spoke about in Boston in a lecture in 1969, very, very early on, December 22nd. And he contrasted, he said, he explained, what does it mean to be not bewildered? He says, so does it mean to become a family man is bad? No, it does not mean. But be grahastha, not gramedi. Gramedi means they simply want to decorate the apartment and wife and children. That is the goal of their life. That is all. They have no other business. Apashyatam, blind to the value of life. Whereas the grahastha, he is not blind. He is simply looking how to become successful in Krishna consciousness. And this is something that we actually see, I've seen empirically. Even, we do our Bhakti Vriksha and we see this pattern that, people who come and they start attending the Bhakti Vriksha, and then inevitably, at some point they will come and say, Prabhu, I bought a house. And then, of course, we are happy they bought a house, but we know that for some time, we are not going to see a lot of them. So then, we call on Friday, Prabhu, are you coming for Namat? They said, no, I'm going to Home Depot. So Home Depot becomes a new Namat there, because there's so much stuff that you need to do for the house and take care of it. Yeah, and whatever it is. Unfortunately, most of them eventually become more regular. But I do eventually, people, they have the Graha Pravesh Yagya. So when I do the Yagya, that's one of the points I always make based on Prabhupada's lecture, making this distinction between being Rasta and not a Gramedi, between owning the house and not letting the house own you. Okay, next verse, verse 5. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagvani Ishvaro Hari Shrotavya Kirtivayascha Smartavya Che Chatabhyam. O descendant of King Bharat, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear about, glorify, and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the super soul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. So, if you remember, uh, two questions were asked by maybe four questions, but uh, two questions times two. He asked, "What's the dharma of a person, and what's the dharma of a person who is about to die?" And then for each of these two, he said, "What not to do, what to do, and what not to do." So previously, Sukadeva Goswami was talking about the what not to do. And this is the typical sequence actually. So if you notice in Astanga Yoga, before Niyam comes Yam. So Yam are the restrictions. The restrictions, they make you ready to accept the niyams. The only place where the niyam comes before Yam is in Bhakti. In Bhakti, Mahaprabhu says, you chant. Don't give up anything. Be sinful, be irreligious, but chant. The potency of chanting is so much that it will automatically introduce the aversion to sinful activities, because bhakti is independent. But otherwise, there is always the yam before the niyam. Before we get the instruction to chant 16 rounds, we get we make the commitment to follow the four regulative principles. So that is the yam, and the niyam is the process of chanting. So Sukadeva Goswami had spoken about what not to do. That don't become a grahamedi. Don't become too much attached to the fallible soldiers. Now he is addressing what to do. So what one should do? He says that one should shrotavya. One should hear. Kirtavya. Kirtavya means speak, sing, or kirtan. Kirtan literally means to glorify. Kirti means glories. Kirtan means glorify. And smartavya. One must remember. And who should be the object of this? So, Sarvatma. So, Sarvatma is another name for Paramatma. Then, Bhagwan. Bhagwan is Krishna, Swayam Bhagwan, and Ishvara. Ishvara Hari. So, Ishvara is Krishna's controlling energy through which he controls everything. Is all pervasive energy. So Jiva Goswami, he writes that that the texts 2 to 4, they describe the people who neglect hearing about Krishna. And text 5, on the other hand, is telling the devotees how they should act and where they should take shelter. And Srila Sridhar Swami, he comments that after describing what not to be done, Sukadeva describes the proper object. So the essential recommendation here by Sukadeva Goswami is not to perform fruitive activities, but to perform bhakti. And this is the only way, he says, for people, ichchata, for people who are desiring abhayam, fearlessness. So abhayam means fearlessness. Abhayam also refers to Krishna, because Only Krishna is the only person who can actually grant real abhaya. So this point will be explicitly made again in verse 13. So in this verse we see Hari. So Hari is again pointing to abhayam. So Hari is one who takes away. And in this context is one who takes away fear. So he is described as in three ways by three modifiers. And acharyas say that three types of bhakti are described in this verse. So what are the modifiers that are applied on Hari? First is Sarvatma. So this is, as we discussed, Paramatma. And this applies to Mokshakrat. So Mokshakrat are people who are attracted to liberation. So these are people who are following the path of either Gyan or Dhyan. And Sukadeva Goswami is saying is that for you, the Supreme Lord is the only person who can deliver you. Then Hari is described as Bhagwan, which is Swayam Krishna. And this is for people who are pursuing the path of Raghunag Bhakti, that they want to get personal association with Krishna. Third modifier that is used is Ishvara, and which is controller, and Vaidi. So this is the Lord who is the controller, should be heard by the person who is controlled, who desires the Lord to cause fearlessness. So, so I was not sure whether these are Brahmavadis. I believe it is. Prabhupada does not explicitly say, but one of the defining characteristics of Brahmavadis is lack of agitation, is the fact that they are abhayam. And because they're exclusively seeking the Ishvara. So Ishvara is basically the Krishna energy. So you can feel like a king's energy, you can feel everywhere. Everything is under the control of the king. The king is not present. By the order of the king, tax is collected. By the order of the king, criminals are executed. But there is no king there. Everything is happening. So the king is everywhere, but there is no person king. So same way, we see Ishvara Vaidi, that the Lord who is the controller. So essentially, what Sukadeva Goswami is saying is that whether you are whether you are aspiring for the Brahman, whether you are aspiring for the Paramatma, or whether you are aspiring for Krishna Swayam Bhagavan, this is the way that you should follow, which is that one must hear about, glorify, and remember the personality of Godhead. Sridhar Swami comments slightly differently. So he says that all these names can be understood to be in the context of a devotee. So this is the more Vaishnava interpretation. So he says Sarvatma. So by Sarvatma, Sukadeva Goswami is saying that the Lord who is dear to everyone, Sarvatma. So the Atma now points to the Jiva, and this is now pointing to the Lord who is dear to all the Jivas. Then by the word Hari, he is saying that he who takes away. And what does he take away? He takes away the bondage of repeated material existence. Then he says the phrase abhayam ichhata indicates those who desire liberation. So, so in his view, it's not really Brahman, Paramatma, or Krishna, but all of them are pointing. Sukadeva Goswami is saying that all of them point to Krishna, and this point is made later on also, that the nature of Sukadeva Goswami as a devotee is that he will guide one towards Krishna. But we will also see that Sukadeva Goswami, before speaking about Krishna, will speak about Krishna's Virat Roop. He will speak about Krishna's impersonal form. Impersonal form in the sense form in matter. And the reasons are explained here. So both the reasons give us some similar realization in terms of what Sukadeva Goswami is speaking here. Prabhupada says that there are many classes of human beings: the fruitive workers, the empiric philosophers, the mystic yogas, and ultimately the unalloyed devotees. For all of them, one and the same process is applicable for achieving the desired success. Everyone wants to be free from all kinds of fear. Everybody wants to be free from all kinds of fear. And everybody wants the fullest extent of happiness. So in the term Shrotavya, Kirtavyas, Cha, Smartavyas, the word Cha is literally means hand, and, but what it indicates that the Shrotavya must be followed by Kirtavya, which must be followed by Smartavya. And the result of it is Abhayam. So in the second verse, Sukadeva Goswami had condemned Shrotavyadini, and now he glorifies it. Same activity. But the reason is that the object has changed. There he condemned Shrotavyani because of the Sahasreshu, because of the thousands of mundane subjects that one wants to hear about and talk about. Here he glorifies it because it is in the context of Hari. So if one hears about the Sahasrasha Graheshu Grahamedina, the thousands of material topics that result, and this is given in the previous verses, that result in Pramato Nidanam, that results in delusion resulting in destruction, that is condemned. But not Shrotavyasya Hari, not hearing about the topics of Hari. And the other point again is that they work close to one another. If you hear, you must speak. And when you speak, you must meditate. So you hear, you share, and then meditation is realizations. And one should develop realizations about it. So Dhanudhar Maharaj, he makes an elaborate observation on this, and he relates it to the practical work that is done in ISKCON. So he says that preaching means not only to speak the truth, but to prepare the person. So now he's commenting on the activities of Sukadeva Goswami in relationship to Parishad Maharaj. So he says one must gradually build a whole culture around the person. One must see both the truth and the misconception. Now Sukadeva Goswami has spoken the answer to Parishad Maharaj. Does that mean that the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is finished? No. He must destroy the misconceptions also. To explain the principles of Krishna consciousness, so everybody can understand Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1 and can understand period. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1 has everything we need to know. Dhimahi means Gayatri Mantra, to purify us and bring us to goodness. It means one must become purified to become qualified to worship Krishna without misconception. Just as the four regulative principles. If we prematurely meditate on Krishna's pastimes, we don't understand. The Bhagavatam purifies us gradually. Bhurijan Prabhu said that the third canto, which glorifies Varaha, explains that first we must understand that the Supreme Lord is transcendental, regardless of the form. So, important preaching point that is made over here is the essence is not presented in isolation. The whole culture is built around it. That why is the essence important? What are the misconceptions? How can you dispel them? What are the obstacles in dispelling the misconceptions? How to overcome those obstacles? How do you know that you're making progress in the conception? Unless that is done, one cannot really guarantee a person to make progress. And that's why, even though Siddhev Goswami has answered Parikshit Maharaj's questions in terms of what to do, what not to do, he does not get up and walk away. Because now he needs to create this whole culture of acceptance. Okay, let me stop here and see if there's any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I'm like, um, uh, I'm just trying to understand, like you mentioned something about death as being the greatest enemy. Uh,
Right.
yeah, so I'm like trying to understand, like, how is that and why is that considered like that?
So in the conditioned state, the one thing that the person is most uh, fearful of, and the one thing that the person is always fighting to protect oneself, is death. Like we see so many sages, they perform so severe austerities by which they endure so much of pain. They undergo so many trials and tribulations in order to avoid death. Hiranyakashipu, Ravan, so other people. So maybe we don't have that wherewithal, we don't have that capacity, but essentially that is the greatest fear that we have, that when we die we will lose everything. So how to stay with our families, stay with our friends. I know in India, people say that I want to see my grandchild's face. Another way of saying that I aspire to live that long. And if the grandchild is born, then they say, I want to see a great grandchild's face. So you just this desire that is coming from all mundane attachments. And so that is the abhayam that the process of spirituality gives us. It does not take death away, but it takes the fear of death away. That's
Right.
the
I mean, I understand like death being like that's the greatest fear, and that's how we like that is what everybody is trying to protect themselves from. But I'm just trying to understand from enemy perspective, like why is that because like we are always is that because like fear is something that is very difficult to overcome in that sense? Is that
so enemy is more of a metaphor. Enemy is used in the way that the enemy is one who is constantly causing you trials and tribulations. Enemy is somebody who's attacking you and you're trying to defend yourself. That's a metaphor for the effect of death on us is the effect that an enemy has on us. And death per se is preceded by old age and disease. So they're kind of lumped together, old age, disease and death. In that way, it's considered to be an enemy.
thank you, Prem. And the last point you made in this verse was like Shukdev Goswami, he basically waited for Parikshit Maharaj to accept. He didn't just like say things like you mentioned, like he didn't just say things and leave. He basically waited like. he waited until Parikshit accept. Like, I'm just trying to understand, like, what is like acceptance? Does that mean like that Parikshit was what is acceptance? Like, I mean, is that following practical? Is that practical devotion? So is that acceptance?
Yes, yes. But acceptance at a deeper level, right? Which comes from details. The and typically that you see that happens in these preaching activities you see in the scriptures is they state the tattva. It's like a sandwich. They'll state the tattva and then they'll follow up with a lot of fact talking about leading up to the tattva. Why is this important in both the pros and the cons? And then conclude by stating the tattva again. We see that in the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 2, Krishna states the tattva, and then he talks about so many other things, right? He talks about Buddhi Yoga right up front. And then he starts talking about Karma, Gyan, Astang, and again he talks about, and then he concludes by stating the tattva again. Practical preachers who are experts, you'll see that that's how they follow up. They'll when somebody is inquiring from them, they will say, well, this is what you need to do. And then they talk about the finer aspects to it. That this is the reason you should do it, obstacles, why do people not do it, empirical examples. Then that's where the you know the stuffing comes. And then they say, therefore you have to do it. And that's exactly what Sukadeva Goswami has done. He has stated the tattva that uh, you should Shrotavasya Kirtasya Smaranasya. You should speak, hear, and think about Krishna. Right? That's the way of perfection. You should not do all these three things about mundane activities. He has given the do and the don't. The Bhagavatam is finished. Pariksha Maharaj's questions have been answered. If a person can do it, then that's good enough. But as an experienced preacher, he knows that person cannot do it. So you will see that the very next thing that he speaks has nothing to do with bhakti. He will speak about Astang Yoga after that, and then he'll talk about bhakti much later on over there, and then of course he will conclude with bhakti. Very similar question was. I'm paraphrasing a lot in this because I don't remember the verbiage, but a very similar question once somebody asked Srila Prabhupada that why so many things? Why doesn't they simply present us? That Krishna is God, worship him. It's simple. Why is there so many other things that are there? They just confuse us. And Prabhupada said is because we are crooked, that we don't accept the simple things. So because we are crooked, the preachers have to be crooked. So they say that you worship Krishna, and your mind will go and say, yeah, worship Krishna, but Indra is like Krishna, I'll worship Indra. And then there is something in the Bhagavatam that says, no, Indra is not like Krishna. So, okay, maybe Indra is not Krishna. How about Lord Shiva? No, Lord Shiva is not like Krishna. Okay, maybe I am Krishna. No, you're not Krishna. So then, because of all that crookedness that we have, our mind will seek to take shelter of different temporary shelters. And the Bhagavatam or the scriptures or the preacher, they anticipate all that. And that's where they spend most of the time.
Thank you, Bhuvan. Thank you for taking the class today. I feel like you're not very well today. You're cold or something.
Well, I just entered Bhishma Panchak, so it was a little, firstly it went 6 days. And Bhishma Panchak, I chant 64 rounds every day. So I think the chanting does something to my voice there.
For us, it was only 5 days, Roji. I mean,
I know. In
yeah,
Chicago, it was 5 days. But in our case, the Vish Panchak ended Tuesday morning at 8:30. So the way it happens is that if it ends after the sun rises, then you have to follow the whole day. So we had so we had one extra day of Vish Panchak. But 2 years ago, we had a 4-day Vish Panchak. So Krishna gives and Krishna takes. But I'm sorry if my voice comes across as a little hoarse. Anything else? Any other questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Couple of questions, Prabhuji. First one is like, all the fear of death I could see very clearly in the self. But still, many times, like, we see our relatives being dying, and, our grandparents, you know, died. So, like death, it was not convincing, or initially, the the sadness doesn't hit me quickly. It takes a while, actually, like to realize that, to accept that they really died, because it was not convincing even when I see the dead body. So, like, until yesterday also he is alive. Now he is like sleeping. Like that, like, the is it natural not to accept death also, like, because, even though I know theoretically and I could clearly see visible changes in the self too, and but still one day I will die means, like, it's kind of bewildering, like, uh,
You're right. They say, and I'm now not speaking from scriptural basis, but I'm talking about um, the anatomy of grief, and they say that it goes through different stages. Don't remember the stage, but I know the first stage is denial, and the second stage is anger, and then there is some subsequent stage, and finally it ends in acceptance. So in situations like this, the first stage is denial, that somebody close to us died. So we just shut ourselves off. Intellectually we may know, but experientially we shut ourselves off. We don't let that experience creep into our body. And then there is, it's kind of interesting that it's a little callous, that but they say that when somebody dies, then people really grieve for the person who has died. People actually grieve for themselves.
correct, Prabhu.
So they grieve that, how could you do this to me? Uh, if somebody is materially dependent, then they will say, how could you do to this? What will happen to me? If somebody is emotionally dependent, so different kinds, depending on the various kinds of dependence, the person actually grieves for themselves. And that's why, because you don't treat somebody's death as the death of that person, but as the hurt that it has caused you. So you deal with, it's almost the same as somebody comes and inflicts some pain on you. You deal with it in that way. So that's why it goes through a very similar process of grieving. That there is first denial, and that's why the point you were making is it doesn't really register. It's body's defense mechanism. And then there is anger, that how could you do this to me? It's unfair. You should be like, I can give you my case, that my father passed away when he was pretty young, and I was in the US at the time, uh, and unfortunately, because of my visa situation, I could not be there at the time of his death. And for the most part, I was very upset at him that he left his body at the time when I had this visa situation with me. Just a few months later on, that was at the time that if I left the country, then I would have to restart the whole process. Of course, I did not know that he was going to pass away. I knew that he was sick, but I did not know that he was that sick. But I remember, I was living in Chicago at the time, and there was this Lemon temple that was close to where I lived, and then I would go there, and I would I wasn't associated with ISKCON, and then that's what would go through my mind, that you know how could he do this to me? Maybe part of my brain said, maybe if he had stayed for some time longer, at least I could have gone back and seen him. So it's at the end of the day, Prabhu, it is ahankar. I mean, if you keep all the scientific reasoning away, so the literal meaning of aham, I think I explained this in the Bhakti Shastri. You attend that also. That atmaha, ha means killer, and aha means not killer. So the nature of aham is self-preservation. That I am there. I cannot be destroyed. I should not be destroyed. So that is the one that actually it actually drives all our actions and all our existence.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, and my second question is also in the similar line, Prabhuji. Like, many times, although I have sufficiently grown up and people around me treat like an elderly man, in mentally, I think that, just the way I was a kid, how I was treated, I would think sometimes a 20, 25 years African American seeing long, strong and all, I think he is elder to me. But uh, is mental age kind of also stops Prabhu depending on each individual at a particular age, whichever may be the best time of his life?
You should probably see a doctor about it.
Not like that.
I don't know if mental. I mean, it's more like a medical question.
Oh, not like that, Prabhuji, because sometimes we hear that people saying that age is to the body but not to the mind. When we see sometimes interviews, a 60-year man also says that I am still young, like that.
I think all that is relative, right? 60-year-old man saying that I'm still young, means that maybe maybe his health is good or whatever it is. But if somebody's mental development has stopped, I mean, mentally you should always grow, right? There's no age when it should stop growing. Mentally, you should always grow. You're always gathering experiences. You're always gathering knowledge in Krishna consciousness. You're always having more realizations. Every time you chant, you're having more realizations. For some reason, you're not mentally growing. Something is wrong. So, when one comes to Krishna consciousness, then one actually grows by leaps and bounds. That yeah, I personally have this experience. Not that I'm very advanced or whatever, but in India, I have relatives who are one generation above me, like maybe in the 70s and the 80s, and they find it quite natural to talk to me about their own realizations. They say, oh, I heard you're a Hare Krishna, but how do you Hare Krishnas deal with illness? Or, what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita about dealing with children who are not supporting you? You're trying to get a special perspective on material.
Correct, Prabhu. Agreed. Yeah, that difference is definitely there in terms of our thought process that devotees gave.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. So let me proceed. I do notice that for some reason my number of verses I do has fallen. I was doing about 10 verses, and I'm seeing that I'm almost out of time. Just half an hour left. So maybe I think one thing is the verses are a little. I know the later verses are. Prabhupada has not got written many purports on it, so I'm hoping that they'll go a little faster. But I do have an internal goal of minimum 10, but hopefully somewhere between 10 to 15 verses for discussion. Okay, 217. Prayana munaya raja nivrata vidisedataha nairgunyastharamante sma gunanukathane hare. O King Parikshit, mainly the topmost transcendentalists who are above the regulative principles and restrictions take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord.
Okay, we
So,
missed the previous verse.
oh, I did. I'm sorry about that.
We were at 6.
Okay. Sorry, let me do 6 then. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam Swadharma Pranisthaya Janmalabha Parapumsham Antanarayano Smriti. I'm sorry, Antanarayana Smriti. The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. So previously, Sukadeva Goswami had described different aspects of Krishna as the Paramatma, as the Brahman, as Bhagwan. Now he is talking about different aspects of the goals, the path to them. So he says that, either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit. So what is this? This is Sankhya. So this is Jnana Yoga. By the practice of mystic powers. This is Astanga Yoga. Or by perfect discharge of occupational duty. This is Karma Yoga. So by Jnana Yoga, by Astanga Yoga, one can achieve the Paramatma. By Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, one can achieve either the Brahman or maybe the demigods, or but here he's speaking more about in the context of Krishna. But the point that he says is that Param, the highest goal, and then he says Etavan, all of this. So he collectively sweeps together all of this. That the high Param Etavan, that higher than all this is Narayana Smriti. The higher than all this is meditation on Narayan. So Sridhar Swami says, even though Etavan literally means all of these, he translates Etavan to the highest goal of all of these. And he does this because he's an acharya, and I think there's some explanation of why it is justified. But we won't go into that details. We accept that. So the point that is made is that of all of this, Etavan, Narayana Smriti is mentioned to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. So neither Sankhya nor yoga nor any spiritual path other than devotional service can bring one to this goal, which is to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the end of life. So this is answering Parikshit Maharaj's second question. Oh, I have something in chat. Oh, okay. Uh, Sorry about that. So what was Parisha Maharaj's second question? That what should a man do who is about to die? So he's saying, what should a man do who is about to die? Narayana Smriti. So because at this point, Shrotasya, Kirtavasya are, you're past that point now. When you're about to die, your senses close up. Your tongue, your throat, uh, your throat chokes. There's what's called phlegm in your throat. Your senses become disconnected. So you can't do, even though great personalities can do that, but they are the ones who are not really dying. They are the ones who are actually giving up their body. Like Srila Prabhupada. Even at the end of the life, he was translating Bhagavatam. If you look at the purports in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, uh, I'm sorry, 13th chapter, those purports were given by Prabhupada uh, when he was just a few days away from his death. So, he can do it, but ordinary people can't do it. So Narayan, Sukadeva Goswami is saying Narayana Smriti. So while it is answering the question what one who is able to die should do, he is also answering the question of what one should do. And the answer to both the questions is the same, Narayana Smriti. So ante, and the key word over here is ante, end. So when we apply, what does ante mean? There are different congruent meanings that come out from this. So one understanding of ante means that all these processes end in bhakti. So he has given 3 processes before that. So he has talked about karma, asgyan, and astang, and then a practitioner who is fortunate enough to get Vaishnav Sangh. All these processes will end in Narayana Smriti. And Prabhupada in the purport says that this is possible only by the association of a pure devotee. And the examples of these are the 4 Kumaras, the Navyogendras, Prachinabhari, that they were following, the 4 Kumaras were following the path of Gyan. Navyogendras were following the process of Astang. I'm not sure Prachinabhari. I think he was following the process of karma. But by the association of devotees, 4 Kumaras by the association of Tulsi Devi, Navyogendras, I believe, by the association of Narad Muni. I'm not sure about Prachinabhari. But it ended in Narayana Smriti, ended in bhakti. Another meaning of ante that applies over here is that when bhakti appears, all these processes end. Why? Because there is no need for them. Bhakti in itself is sufficient. Third meaning of ante is that even if one temporarily gives up ante bhakti, they will not take to these inferior processes. So even if it is ante bhakti, even if one gives a bhakti, such a person, because he has tasted the mellow of bhakti, will not take to karma, jnana, and dhyan. So ante then applies to these 3 processes. I mean, ante applies to bhakti in the context of these 3 processes. And Prabhupada mentions that none of the devotees of the Lord ever deviated from the path of devotional service by taking to any of the other methods. So we have cases of Gyanis and yogis and karmkandis becoming devotees. But you won't see a case of a devotee becoming a yogi. They may fall as a devotee temporarily, but they will take to devotional service. You won't see a devotee saying that, oh, Krishna, I'm going to give up Krishna, I'm now going to practice Astanga Yoga. So the ante means that even if bhakti temporarily ends, the attraction for that person has also ended. The fourth understanding of ante is life. That towards the end of the life, one needs to take to this process. So Prabhupada says that, in other words, life should be molded in such a manner that one is able to progressively remember the personality of Godhead in every step of life. So, and then later on says that we should practice bhakti so that ante, when our life is ending, then Narayana Smriti. Then automatically our mind goes to Narayan. One should also understand that hearing and chanting are not separate endeavors. Hearing is not a lesser activity. That Sukadev Goswami is condescendingly recommending for a materialistic king, right? So he's not saying that you're a Kshatriya and I'm a Brahman. For you, listening is the best thing. So the destination of Parishad Maharaj and Sukadev Goswami was the same. Just as Sukadev Goswami perfected his life by speaking, Parishad Maharaj perfected his life by inquiring, and the sages perfected the life by hearing. All three of them achieved the same destination. Prabhupada in one of the lectures comments on this verse, and he says that you say that whatever path we may follow, ultimately we go to the same goal. That is very nice, provided if we actually go to the same goal. Otherwise, it is misleading. Okay, verse 7. Prayena muniyo raja nivrata vidhisedataha nairgunyastharamante sma gunanukathane hari. O King Parikshit, mainly the topmost transcendentalists who are above the regulative principles and restrictions take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. So Sukadev Goswami here is dispelling the notion that Shravan and Kirtan are inferior in any ways. So a person who is a yogi will say that where is the endeavor? Where is sitting motionless in one place, controlling your breath for thousands of years? The Jnani will say that where is reading the scriptures, controlling your senses, having complete mastery on the senses? The Karmi will say that where is performing elaborate yagyas, where is being strictly adhering to the process of piety. So these people who follow the process of Shravan and Kirtan, they're weak people. And this is a criticism. So even though in the current day and age, there are obviously no Gyanis and Karmis and Yogis, but we see the people criticizing the Bhaktas. They say that they're sentimentalists. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was criticized this way when they went to Nawab Hussain. They said they're all sentimental fools, and because they cannot follow the rigor of the scriptures, they just sing and dance. and they're creating confusion. So Sukhdev Goswami wants to make sure that one does not fall prey to that misconception. So here he actually goes to the other extreme. And he says that they are actually the topmost transcendentalists and who are above the regulative principles and restrictions. So he is the person at this point who is describing the glories of the Lord. Parishit Maharaj is the person who's taking pleasure in the description of the glories of the Lord. So he says, who are above the regulative principles and restrictions. And that is Sukhdev Goswami. He never received any formal initiation, did not go to any gurukul, did not have any samskar done. But yet he's sitting over here in front of some of the most elevated people, speaking to Parishit Maharaj, who from a materialistic perspective is a king. Parishit Maharaj himself says that the transcendentalist treats people like me like refuse, like the footbath place of the place where people wash their feet. So not from a way to flatter Parishit Maharaj or to boast about his position, but he actually glorifying the process. And in order to exemplify it, he will, in 5 verses, Sukhdev Goswami will describe how he himself studied the Bhagavatam. So one can then question that what about the regulative process of karma jnana and astha? They're also there in the scriptures, and they're meant for people who are making advancement while still being attached to the modes. So while they are still in love with the prison, they're gradually being revealed to the world outside the prison, and because of that they have to go through a structured systemic process. Nirgunyastaha. So Nirgunyastaha, so Gunya of course means the mode. Nirgunya means that one who has transcended the modes. Nirgunyastaha is one who is situated in this position of having transcended the modes. Is Guna Anukathane Hare. So Sukhdev Goswami, he's being a little poetic at this time. He uses guna in both the places. So Nirgunya is the modes of material nature, and guna is the quality of Anukathanes Hare. So Katha is Krishna Katha, Anu means following. That they closely follow or they're attached to it. So people who have transcended Nirgunyastha, transcended the gunas, and who have the guna, who have the quality of Anukathane Hare, who have the quality of following the Katha, Krishna Katha. These are the people who take pleasure in Shravan Kirtan. So Jiva Goswami says that this is an example of Kaimutya Nyaya. So Kaimutya Nyaya is essentially means how much more so. So you can say that a bulb lights up the room. The sun is 10 million times more powerful than the bulb. So how much more so is the ability of the sun to light? That is Kaimutya Nyaya. So the point that is making over here is that even if these exalted people who are Nirgunyastaya, who are Gunakantanehara, are glorifying Krishna, how much more so will those who are not so advanced benefit? So uh, uh, the medicine is so potent that even somebody who is healthy takes it and benefits from him, how much more so will a person who is sick benefit from it? So that is the Kaimutya Nyaya that he's applying over here. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Sukhdev Goswami uses the word prayena. So prayena translates to generally or mainly, to indicate that there is a possibility of exceptions. And what are the exceptions? So this was a discussion that we had on Monday in the last part of our Bhagavatam lecture, where Paramatma Prabhu was inquiring about a statement that was made by Bhurijan Prabhu, that even the impersonalists perform bhakti. And the reason they perform bhakti is they see it as a means to an end. But I'll perform bhakti and make advancements, and then after I make advancement, I'll give up bhakti, and then I will merge into the absolute. So the word prayena also refers to the same thing. That there are some jivas who will perform this this Shravan and Kirtan, not because they take pleasure in these activities, because they consider the process to be inferior, but they consider this as an way for them to merge into the Lord. They consider this as an intermediate step. So as for Vishwanath Chakravarti, that's why Sukadeva Goswami is using the word prayena, which means generally. He is not saying this is true always. So it is not always true that a person who is doing Shravan Kirtan is performing Shuddha Bhakti. Sometimes a person is performing Shravan Kirtan may also be performing not Bhakti, but something else. So Prabhupada in the purport also makes the same point, that the highest perfection of transcendental realization is to take pleasure in hearing and describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, and not in merging into his impersonal Brahman existence, for which the impersonal monist aspire. There are others who are not the topmost transcendentalists, but are in a lower status, who do not take pleasure in describing the transcendental activities of the Lord. Rather, they discuss such activities of the Lord formally with the aim of merging into his existence. In a lecture on this verse, Srila Prabhupada comments that Anukathane, Anu means not whimsically, following the superior authorities. Anukathane means you must hear from the authority perfectly, then try to write, not that you write whimsically, whatever you write. Okay, I think I'll do one more verse and then I'll stop. So it's kind of a big verse, but still, we'll do it. 8th verse. Idam bhagavatam nama puranam brahma sammitam aditvan aditavan dvaparadao aditavan dvaparadao piturdvape yanadaham. At the end of the Dwapara Yuga, I studied this great supplement of Vedic literature named Srimad Bhagavatam, which is equal to all the Vedas from my father, Srila Dwapayan Vyasadeva. So, I mean, of course, in the verse, we don't see the word Bhagavatam appear, and in the translation we do. But by using the word idam, this, Sukadeva is saying that this that I'm going to, that I'm going to speak about. I'm sorry, the word Bhagavatam does appear, but the word idam, the word this is established by context, because what follows is the speaking of the Bhagavatam. So one can say that the Bhagavatam is something else, but he's saying idam Bhagavatam, that what I'm going to speak now is the Bhagavatam. So he had previously glorified, in the answer to the question of Parikshit Maharaj, he had glorified speaking and hearing about Krishna as the path to perfection. And um, uh, uh, technically that is the answer to the question complete. So Sukadeva Goswami is not simply answering the question, but he's addressing the intent also. So the same point was we made earlier on, that is creating a whole culture around it. So the analogy that can be given to understand it is that if one asks, do you know the way to the temple? And the person may answer, yes. Now technically, that is the complete correct answer to the question. That he asked, do you know the way to the temple? And the person says, yes, I know the way to the temple. But no intelligent person will give that answer, because beyond the question is the intent of the speaker. The only reason the speaker is asking this question is because he wants to go to the temple, and he wants to be told what is the way of the temple. Now the person could ask the full question, that I would like to go to the temple. Do you know the way of the temple? If you do know the way of the temple, kindly tell me the way of the temple. But that is basic technical redundance. The intent of the questioner is divined by the intelligence of the audience, of the person that the question is asked of. So when Sukadeva Goswami was asked this question, that what should one do, then he is not just addressing the question of how to attain perfection, he's also going to help him, give him all the directions. So he's not just saying, yes, I know the way to the temple, but he's also going to tell him the route. This is how you will go. This is where you will turn. There is a turn over here. Don't take that turn. There is an offshoot over there. Don't take that. There is a small hut over there. That's a milestone. So the way that at least in India people give directions is they paint a picture, and by giving what are the major milestones, what are the major landscapes, and that's exactly what Sukadeva Goswami is going to do. Bhagavatam, that the word Bhagavatam that is used here, idam Bhagavatam nama. So Bhagavatam means that which is spoken by the Lord, or that which concerns the Lord. So here it refers to both, and it also refers to Srimad Bhagavatam. So basically what Sukadeva Goswami is saying, that I will tell you that which is spoken by the Lord, because Bhagavatam has the whole 11th canto, Uddhav Gita, that's all spoken by the Lord. The Bhagavatam is concerning the Lord, 10th canto, other cantos also, Lord's devotees, not different from the Lord. And more specifically, Bhagavatam is talking about the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why do we know that? Because right after that, Idam Bhagavatam, he says Nama Purana, because it is qualified by Nama Purana. So what Sukadeva Goswami is saying, that now I will be reciting this Puran by the name of Bhagavatam. And then he proceeds to glorify the Bhagavatam. He says this Brahma Samhita, that it is approved as the essence of the Vedas. It is the cream of the Upanishads, and it is eternally perfect. And then Parishar Maharaj might ask that, if I write a book and then I go about telling everybody that it's perfect, the person will say that, what are your credentials? What makes the book perfect? So Sukadev Goswami, he establishes the credentials. He says, I received it in disciplic succession from my father, Srila Vyasadeva. And the reason he says my father, Srila Vyasadeva, not to indicate that there was a filial relationship there, but he wants to say that this is this Vyasadeva, Srila Vyasadeva, who happens to be my father, who comes in the disciplic succession of the um, Brahma Sampradaya, this Vyasadeva. Because again, these are topics that will be read for thousands of years, and anybody else can lay claim to it. In fact, there is a personality that appeared later on, I believe in the 9th century, by the name of Vopadev. And his followers claim that he is Vyasadeva, that the Vyasadeva is actually, it's actually an aberration of his name. So he was also somebody who was learned in the scriptures. He wrote a lot of, I'm not sure what was his philosophy, but there are people who claim that when it's said that Srila Vyasadeva, they're actually saying Vopadev. So Sukadev Goswami wants to be clear that this Vyasadeva is my father who appears in a bona fide sampradaya. I received the Brahma Samhitam from him. So Parikshit Maharaj may now inquire that how come such a wonderful work was not known? Is Sukadev Goswami just boasting, sitting over there saying that this is the Brahma Samhitam? So Sukadev Goswami says, Dwaparadav. So literally Dwaparadav means at the beginning of Dwapar. Now that statement obviously cannot be true because Vyasadeva appeared towards the end of the Dwapar. And of course, Sukadev Goswami appears after Vyasadeva. So the Acharyas, what they say is that by understanding the context in which this is being spoken, that because he is establishing through the parental relationship, he's saying Pitu Dwapenath, that I received it from my father, Dwapeyan, who appeared towards the end of the Bhagavatam. So one should understand that the statement Dwapara Adav does not mean at the beginning of the Dwapar, but it means at the beginning of the end of Dwapar. So when the Dwapar Yuga was beginning to end. And as we know, Kali Yuga was about to begin. So Prabhupada comments, the logic of the statement according to Srila Jiva Goswami is comparable to that of calling the upper portion of the tree the beginning. The root of the tree is the beginning of the tree, but in common knowledge, the upper portion of the tree is first seen. In that way, the end of the tree is accepted as its beginning. This is also the current time of the conversation. Sukadev Goswami is thus saying, this is a recent compilation, which is why you may not have heard it. So how did Sukadev Goswami receive the Bhagavatam from his father? He says, Aditavan. It was taught to me. So the point is that one cannot receive the Bhagavatam by the dint of one's own efforts. The Bhagavatam cannot be taken. The Bhagavatam needs to be given. And even a person as advanced as Sukadev Goswami, in sincere humility, he is saying that my father taught it to me. And Prabhupada mentioned in the purport that the Srimad Bhagavatam, or for that matter, any other scientific literature, cannot be studied at home by one's own intellectual capacity. Medical books of anatomy or physiology are available in the market, but one cannot become a qualified medical practitioner simply by reading such books at home. One has to be admitted in the medical college to study the books under the guidance of learned professors. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam, the postgraduate study of science of Godhead, can only be learned by studying it at the feet of a realized soul like Srila Vyasadeva. Although Sukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from the very day of his birth, he still had to take lessons of Srimad Bhagavatam from his great father Vyasadeva, who compiled the Bhagavatam under the instruction of another great soul, Radhamani. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed the learned Brahmins to study the Bhagavatam from a personal Bhagavat. Okay, so I'm going to end over here. I'm a little over time. My apologies for that. I'll see if there's any questions or comments.
Just one comment, Prabhuji. You mentioned that for the word ante, like one of the meaning you mentioned is like a devotee may fall down, but and then he can come back, but he will never leave Krishna and go to yogic practice or something like that. That was really reassuring.
Right. Good. Okay. So if there are no more questions, we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhayaschet kripa sindhubhyev cha patitnam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna.